Hello and welcome to LoreDive, where we look into and analyze the stories behind all of our favorite video games. Today we are going back into Resident Evil, as we investigate the first outbreak known to have been caused by bioorganic weapons. An outbreak which is now known as the Mansion Incident. On May 11th of 1998, an outbreak occurred in the Spencer Mansion, leading to the majority of all staff becoming infected with the T-virus. Based on the information found in the diary of one of Umbrella's staff, a keeper whose job it was to take care of the dogs that were being used as test subjects, it became infected on May 11th when the outbreak first occurred, and by May 21st, most had completely succumbed to the infection. During this time, the Umbrella security on site did what they could to keep the staff under control by any means necessary, including executing a scientist who attempted to flee the compound. It wasn't until later that a full report was provided, showing that someone had intentionally spread the virus throughout the mansion, as well as released hostile B.O.Ws on the scientists in the facility. While the outbreak was contained temporarily, eventually all employees had either succumbed to T-virus infection, becoming what is now known as a T-type zombie, or were killed by B.O.Ws loose on the premises. Later in spring of 1998, a series of vicious attacks occurred on the outskirts of a Midwestern town, Raccoon City. The chief of police, Brian Irons, took full control of the investigation, and despite his attempts to cover up the incidents, a coroner that had examined the deceased leaked out information about how the bodies had been found, apparently eaten. In response, the Special Tactics and Rescue Squad, also known as STARS, were sent into action to investigate the situation. Unbeknownst to them, Irons was informed by Umbrella that it was decided that in order to prevent leaks, the members of STARS must be eliminated, and all of the members were being sent to their death. Unknown to anyone else at the time, an Umbrella train known as the Ecliptic Express was transporting researchers and guards to Marcus's abandoned research facility, primarily to obtain information on some of the abandoned research there, as well as investigate what might have happened at the Spencer Mansion. While transporting the staff to the facility, it was attacked by progenitor leeches, and all aboard the train were killed, but not before the emergency brakes were started, causing the train to eventually come to a stop in the woods. After the train didn't report in, Umbrella sent a squad of Umbrella's security service to investigate. Shortly thereafter, STAR's Bravo team was sent out to investigate the recent murders. This team consisted of Enrico Marini, Forrest Spire, Kenneth J. Sullivan, Richard Aiken, Edward Dewey, a brand new pilot for the team only known as Kevin, and medic Rebecca Chambers. While flying over the Raccoon City forest, engine failure caused a forced landing for the team. Unknown to Bravo team, this was no accident, as the engine of the helicopter had been tampered with the intention of leaving the team stranded. The team found themselves unable to radio for assistance, so per protocol, they surveyed the area and quickly came across a turned-over military vehicle with 2 deceased MPs inside. Chambers located a report showing that the two had been transporting convict Billy Cohen to a nearby base for execution. Despite the unusual circumstances and the nature of the soldiers' injuries, Edward Dewey quickly, and incorrectly, assumed that they had been killed by Cohen. Learning of a new possible threat, Marini made the executive decision to search for the missing prisoner as part of their investigation, despite it not being part of their primary mission. The team split up, each heading in different directions. It didn't take long for Chambers to locate the train that had been left at a standstill in the middle of the forest, and so began the most harrowing events of her life. Immediately after entering the train, Chambers located a radio and the now zombified train inhabitants. Though she was shaken by the ordeal, she managed to dispatch them without much trouble before continuing her search. Soon after, Rebecca came across Cohen, who, though he had her at gunpoint, refused to shoot her or allow her to take him into custody. Though Cohen left Chambers alone, she didn't have much time to reflect before Edward Dewey came crashing through the train window. He warned Rebecca about the zombies and monsters roaming around the forest, before passing away due to his injuries. Rebecca didn't have much time to mourn, as the cause of Edward's death soon made itself known. After dispatching the 2 Cerberus dogs, Rebecca received a report from Marini, where she was informed that Cohen had been arrested for killing at least 23 people. This ensured that when she ran into Cohen again, her reaction was immediately hostile. Though Billy offered an olive branch, suggesting that they cooperate together in order to try and survive the night, Rebecca continued her investigation on her own, leaving Cohen to his own devices. She came across the dining car of the Ecliptic Express, which was partially aflame due to the attack that had occurred earlier. Locating what she believed to be an older gentleman near the back of the train, she attempted to wake the man up only for him to fall apart and separate into a swarm of squirming leeches. After either defending herself or attempting to flee, the leech mimic collapsed and the leeches swarmed on Rebecca. Luckily for her, Cohen was drawn in by the noise and in a showing of his expert marksmanship, managed to cease the leech attack. This moment of relief was brief, as a young man was seen singing outside of the train, as leeches gathered around him. Though confused by the appearance of this man, Rebecca and Billy's questions were cut short as the train began to move. Around the time that Rebecca was in conflict with the leeches, the Umbrella Security Service had arrived on the train and had started it up with the intent of reaching the training facility. Cohen stated that they would need to find out who was moving the train, and despite Chambers' reluctance, the two formed an uneasy alliance. While trying to reach the front of the train, the two became separated as one was attacked by leeches again while trying to rewire the electric doors that had become loose. This led to the remaining member of the duo needing to adventure on their own for a short time. But along the way, they ran into a B.O.W. that was being contained on the Ecliptic Express and had broken out after the train had started moving. This B.O.W. was a massive scorpion known as the Stinger. After the Stinger's demise, Rebecca and Billy made their way towards the front of the car. Around this same time, one of the USS members were making a report back to Albert Wesker and William Birkin, who were leading the mission remotely. During the middle of their status report, the Umbrella Security Service members were all killed when the progenitor leeches swarmed the front of the train, leaving Billy and Rebecca as the only people left alive. Quickly realizing that they needed to stop the train or it would derail, one of the duo made their way to the back of the train while fighting through zombified passengers, including a now zombified Edward Dewey. Eventually the member of the team made it, and the two enabled the front and rear brakes in unison. While they were able to successfully slow the train, they weren't able to fully stop it before it derailed in the tunnel outside of the Umbrella training facility. Quickly getting their bearings, the two entered the facility, not knowing that they were being observed by Wesker and Birkin. While watching the pair, the young man who had set the leeches upon the train sent a message to the two observers, blaming them and Umbrella for the death of James Marcus. Along with the train, the young man took responsibility for causing the outbreak at the Spencer Mansion, an act of revenge for the death of the Doctor. Rebecca and Billy investigated the abandoned training facility, running into the zombified remnants of the USS teams that had been killed by B.O.Ws that now infested it, including the progenitor leeches, plague crawlers, crows, and a gigantic centipede known as the Centurion. After investigating the dungeons underneath the facility, Chambers was attacked by an eliminator, leading to her being bitten. Luckily for Chambers, she was not infected with the T-virus and is more than likely immune to its effects. During her standoff with the eliminator, Rebecca fell through a weak section of floor, and although this fall almost led to her death, she was saved last minute by Cohen, who managed to pull her to safety. Almost immediately after this, Chambers managed to get in contact with squad leader Marini, but lied to him about having located Cohen. Under Rebecca's insistence, Billy recounted the incident that led to him being tried and convicted for murder. He revealed that he had been a part of a special tasks unit, sent to take out a guerrilla faction in South America. In the end, however, the group had been working on faulty intel, and many of Billy's teammates died as a result. The guerrilla hideout was actually just a small village, and whether out of anger or due to a psychotic break, Billy's superior officer ordered his squad to open fire on the villagers. Billy attempted to stop the massacre, but failed as his team gunned the innocent civilians down. In order to cover up their tracks, his commanding officer and former team dropped all of the blame at Cohen's feet. Chambers, deciding that Cohen was trustworthy, believed his story, and the two continued their investigation of the training facility. Rebecca and Billy began to investigate the underground testing facility, running into a species of giant spiders that had escaped captivity at some point since the facility had been shut down. Along with the spiders, the pair ran into another bioweapon that had been released, and one that is considered one of Umbrella's most successful and mass-produced creation to date, the Hunter. After investigating the facility thoroughly, the two continued their investigation to a nearby chapel, though its look was primarily for show, as no religious services were ever performed there. While either Rebecca or Billy investigated the interior of the building, they were attacked by a gigantic bat which had become infected with the T-virus. After killing the creature, the two managed to find an elevator leading to a separate lab placed under the chapel. In this lab, Billy located a report with information about Marcus's research, as well as an image of a man who looked nearly identical to the one that the pair had seen singing outside the train. Based on how he looked, Billy came up with the idea that he was likely either Marcus's son or grandson. The pair continued on and ran across a trolley, but before they were able to board, Billy was attacked by an eliminator and fell deep into an underground river, becoming separated from Rebecca. Moving forward on her own, Rebecca came across Enrico Marini at Umbrella's marshalling yard, who informed her of the existence of the Spencer Mansion, also informing her that the rest of the team were planning on meeting there. He ordered her to follow him, but she refused, stating that she needed to locate Cohen, which Marini begrudgingly agreed to let her do. She continued her attempt to locate Billy, and in the process ran across an escaped specimen, a dead end of one of Umbrella's most popular creations, the T-001 Proto-Tyrant. Meanwhile, Wesker and Birkin, deciding that their mission was at a loss, both came to the conclusion that it was time to abandon Umbrella. Birkin provided Wesker with a new prototype virus, one that if worked should give him supernatural speed and strength. While saying goodbye before moving forward with what they believed would be their new lives, Birkin revealed to Wesker that he planned to go to the training facility himself and ensure its destruction with its own self-destruct sequence. Finally locating Billy in an underground tunnel where Marcus had dumped all of his discarded test subjects, the two continued on, fighting the Proto-Tyrant for a second time, and eventually meeting the singing man face to face. The man revealed himself to be none other than Dr. James Marcus himself, explaining that after Spencer had him assassinated, the Queen Leech that he had been experimenting on nested inside of his body and consumed him as an energy source, eventually melding with him and restoring him to life. This, however, isn't entirely accurate. After consuming the corpse of Dr. Marcus in 1988, the Queen Leech consumed his brain, inadvertently gaining his memories and personality. As a result of this parasitism, the Queen Leech rationalized that it was indeed Dr. Marcus, and it had somehow survived an assassination attempt. Having no reason to not believe the Leech Queen, Billy threatened it, and in retaliation, it birthed a slew of additional offspring before attacking the two directly. Chambers and Cohen temporarily defeated the Queen and began their exit from the training facility. At the same time, Birkin managed to infiltrate the compound and begin the self-destruct, giving the duo only a short amount of time to escape. Unfortunately, the Queen Leech had mutated and was hot on their trail. The two fought this much more powerful version of the Queen, but the fighting went awry when the two noticed its sensitivity to sunlight. Rebecca opened the shutters, flooding the area with sunlight, allowing Billy to fire at the weakened Queen with a high-power Magnum revolver, and its body fell down the elevator shaft, where it was consumed by the destruction of the training facility. Around this same time, Wesker was retreating from the training facility, where he ran into Umbrella executive Sergei Vladimir. Along with him were his two personalized versions of the T-003 Tyrant, which he had named the Ivans. Vladimir was not pleased with the attempted destruction of the facility, viewing it as insubordination. He attempted to use the Ivans to force Wesker back in line, but this fell short when the facility exploded, allowing Wesker's escape. Upon reflection of the night's activities, Rebecca decided to report that Billy Cohen had passed away during the night's events, even though, as we now know, he did in fact survive the night. What happened to Cohen after that point is unknown, and the search for him still continues. Though it is possible he managed to escape the forest outside Raccoon City, it's also possible that he fell victim to the dangers within those woods. Either way, we don't have enough information to collaborate either theory at this time. Chambers, on the other hand, was most definitely in the process of walking out of one nightmare and into a brand new one. That same day, Wesker, with the support of Brian Irons, prepared the Alpha Team to go and investigate what happened to Bravo Team. Alpha Team members Jill Valentine, Chris Redfield, Barry Burton, Joseph Frost, and Brad Vickers prepared themselves, and that night took a second helicopter to investigate Bravo Team's disappearance and how it might be related to the violent attacks on the city. During this interim, Rebecca managed to locate fellow team member Richard Aiken, and together they began to search for the other members of the Bravo team. The two ran across Vladimir and one of his Ivans outside the mansion, carrying an unknown package. Though they would have had no way of knowing this, the package was an experimental prototype known as Talus. This project was known to only a few members of Umbrella staff, and now with the outbreak at the mansion, most likely only Vladimir and Wesker would have known about its existence. Rebecca unfortunately didn't get an opportunity to investigate further as the two left the premises, package in tow. Now, despite what the Umbrella Chronicles tells us, Rebecca and Richard must have split up at some point, with Richard coming into contact with another one of Umbrella's dangerous escaped B.O.Ws, a giant snake nicknamed Yawn. Around this time, Alpha Team was able to locate Bravo Team's crashed helicopter, along with the body of Kevin, who had been killed at some point, never having had the opportunity to get out of the helicopter before his demise. The team would soon find a possible culprit behind Kevin's death as they were attacked by a pack of Cerberus that quickly mauled and mutilated Joseph Frost. Brad Vickers, living up to his nickname of Chickenheart, took off with the helicopter, leaving the remaining members stranded in the woods. The group managed to escape into the Spencer mansion, though at this point eyewitness accounts of the incident that occurred from here on don't fully match up, so we'll have to give an estimated synopsis of the events from here on out. Either Chris or Barry ended up getting separated from the remainder of the group, leaving Jill and Chris to explore the mansion separately, while Wesker managed to extricate himself from the rest of the group in the main hall. Alpha Team quickly came across the first of many T-type zombies that had sadly killed Bravo Team member Kenneth Sullivan. Jill or Chris returned to report what they had found to Wesker, only to find him missing. Jill either continued to have contact with, or eventually locate Barry, and the two regularly assisted each other as they investigated the mansion. Eventually the two came across the body of Forrest Spire, who had been pecked to death by crows, and Barry, indicating that Forrest no longer needed it, gave Jill his grenade launcher. On his own, Chris located Rebecca and Richard, who was suffering from a deadly snake bite inflicted by the massive Yawn. Chris either managed to provide serum to Rebecca that would save Richard's life, allowing Rebecca to continue keeping an eye on his health, or Chris failed to get the serum in time, resulting in Richard dying and Rebecca wandering the corridors of the mansion on her own. At some point during the night, Barry and Wesker met, and Wesker provided Barry with some kernels of truth as to what the mansion truly was. He did this to leverage Barry as an asset by telling him that he and Umbrella had taken his family hostage, and would kill them if he didn't do exactly what they told him. As Jill continued to investigate, she came across evidence that there was something going on with Barry, though if confronted, Barry would deny that anything was out of the ordinary, besides being stuck within the zombie-infested mansion. As the remnants of STARS continued their search, they came across several B.O.Ws created by the T-virus. Within the attic and the library was the aforementioned giant snake, Yawn. In the living quarters, a giant bulbous plant known as Plant 42. In the Aqua Ring lab, several great white sharks had escaped confinement, including one that had grown to massive proportions, known as Neptune. And scattered throughout the living area, tunnels, and the mansion, a variation of the giant spiders known as web spinners took residence, including one that had gone through massive mutation, known as the Black Tiger. One B.O.W. that became a severe problem for the members of STARS were the Crimson Head zombies. Due to how long the zombies in the mansion had been infected, many went through further mutation, turning them into these scarlet-skinned horrors. Eventually, either Chris or Jill made their way to a small cottage that had been mainly used for storage, where they came into contact with the pitiable Lisa Trevor. The meeting did not go well. With Lisa's mind all but corroded down to her base instincts, she attacked the officer on sight. Due to her infection, she could not be put down with standard weaponry, and the STARS member had to flee back to the mansion. With STARS slowly putting together what had happened on the estate, Wesker reappeared briefly to Chris and Jill, ordering Chris to investigate the rooms of the mansion that they weren't able to access yet, and sowing the seeds of doubt within Jill, suggesting that Barry might not be acting normally. If Richard was still alive, after he got back on his feet, he continued an investigation, making his way to the Aqua Ring. After running into the sharks, he pushed himself up against the inner edge of the ring, to prevent them from being able to access him. Around the same time though, Chris had also managed to locate the ring, and unaware of the dangers beneath, waded out into the water. Richard attempted to warn Chris about the sharks, but was forced to push him out of the way as the large Neptune attacked, killing Richard in the process. Jill and Barry made their way through the underground cave and tunnel systems, and hearing moans coming through the tunnels, Jill went to check it out on her own, while Barry kept an eye on their escape route. Jill found the source of the moans, Lisa Trevor, and attempted to escape from the monster. Barry, however, took the lift that they used to reach the caves, leaving Jill stranded with Lisa. Chris came into contact with Rebecca again, informing her of Richard's death if she wasn't already aware of it. Rebecca may have then informed Chris about how all of the medicine within the mansion was created by Umbrella. She may have done this in order to possibly provide him with a hint of who was responsible for the incident, without tipping her hand and revealing how much she actually knew. As Wesker's data collection was nearing completion, he released several Hunter Alphas that were being contained in the lab. While Chris and Jill were able to fight these creatures off, Rebecca, who was under-equipped, became trapped in a small office in the mansion. Thankfully, Chris, who heard her screams, arrived just in time to put the creature down before it could kill the young medic. While investigating the caves outside of the mansion, Jill or Chris would come across Enrico Marini, who would attempt to warn them of a traitor within STARS. He unfortunately didn't provide enough information before he was shot and killed by Wesker, leaving the identity of the traitor unsaid. Jill would eventually run across Barry again in a tomb underneath the mansion, where he was trying to open a sarcophagus. Upon realizing that he was being watched, Barry would attempt to shoot Jill, but she was able to easily disarm him. She would begin to interrogate Barry, but the interrogation was cut short when Lisa arrived. Being in a situation where she had to trust Barry, she provided him his weapon, and the two fought against the monstrous Lisa. Jill managed to successfully open the sarcophagus, and Lisa, believing that she had finally found her mother, took the skull of the woman who lay on the stone slab and threw herself into the abyss. It's impossible to know if the woman in the tomb truly was Lisa Trevor, but the important thing is that Lisa believed that she was. Barry didn't believe that Lisa was truly dead, and stayed behind, refusing to provide additional information as to why he attempted to shoot Jill earlier. A topic she oddly didn't press him on, considering she would have already known that there was a traitor amongst the team at this point. Eventually, all surviving members of STARS, Chris, Jill, Barry, Rebecca, and Wesker, found themselves in the laboratory underneath the mansion, where Wesker would put into play his risky and daring plan. He injected himself with the prototype virus provided by William Birkin, and allowed himself to be confronted by his remaining members of STARS. It's still unknown exactly how this confrontation went down, as none of the information provided matches up, though, based off of what we know, we can still give a basic idea of what occurred. In the confrontation with Wesker, Barry would betray Jill, with Wesker revealing that it was he who was pulling his strings. He would then order Barry to wait above ground. From here, he would reveal to Jill and Chris, if he was present, the T-002 Tyrant. Barry, finding that he would be unable to live with himself if he betrayed his teammates again, returned, shooting Wesker and defending Jill. Wesker would manage to release the T-002 from its containment, and without a parasite controlling it, it immediately attacked Wesker, killing him. The remaining members of STARS would defend themselves against this early version of the Tyrant, managing to down the creature relatively easily. Rebecca came up with the idea to set off the lab's self-destruct system, which would kill all the remaining B.O.Ws in the lab and within a certain vicinity of the mansion. While it wouldn't be able to eliminate every creature that had escaped, it would help prevent further infection. The plan that Wesker had put into motion to lure the STARS members into the mansion, to gain combat data off of them, the plan that led to his death, had been executed perfectly. Wesker returned to life, thanks to the prototype virus, stronger and faster than he ever had been before. He attempted to gather Umbrella's data and escape, but found himself locked out of accessing any of Umbrella's files thanks to an AI known as the Red Queen. This AI was designed to prevent oversight of Umbrella's assets, and thanks to information provided by Sergei Vladimir, it rejected any attempts for Wesker's access into the system. Thanks to the self-destruct system having been initiated, Wesker did not have enough time to bypass the Red Queen and had to make his escape. He found himself, however, impeded by Lisa, who had in fact managed to survive her fall into the abyss. It's unknown if Lisa remembered Wesker, or if her addled mind simply led her to attack any living creatures she saw, but she would hound Wesker as he attempted to make his escape. Meanwhile, Jill, Chris, Barry, and Rebecca all made their way to a helipad near one of the entrances to the lab. Here, they managed to send up a flare to alert Brad, who was still searching for his teammates after he flew off without them. The extraction would be interrupted, however, as the Tyrant burst out of the ground and attacked the members of STARS. This time the Tyrant seemed to shrug off most firepower that was thrown at it, and with the timer for the self-destruct sequence ticking down, things began to look grim. Brad managed to drop a modified M202 rocket launcher from the helicopter, and though the Tyrant was durable, the incendiary rocket quickly dispatched the creature. While the STARS members made their escape, Wesker found himself still dealing with Lisa Trevor, as her mutations allowed her to heal faster than he could damage her. Finding himself unable to defeat her through regular means, he managed to pin her under a chandelier in the main hall, leaving her to die in the mansion's explosion. This incident was a catalyst, both for those who survived that night and for the world as a whole. The members of STARS would have their lives irreversibly changed by what they saw and learned. Though Wesker failed in obtaining the data he desired from Umbrella, he had to move on with his new life regardless, eventually selling his soul to a new organization, one that to this day remains unknown. Umbrella would now be on the defensive, with their entire organization at risk of being shut down if proof of their activities could be confirmed. With Wesker believed to be dead to all but a select few who knew of his plans, their eyes were focused on the remaining members of STARS. Unfortunately for Umbrella, and the world as a whole, the mansion incident was but a precursor to one of the largest tragedies the world has ever known. Thank you for watching this episode of LoreDive. It took me a lot longer to do this than I was initially planning, but I'm glad that we were finally able to get it out there. Next time with this LoreDive, we'll be going into the Raccoon City incident, which is a lot to cover since it's not only about Resident Evil 2 and 3, but also the Outbreak series, which that's a lot of information. Special thanks again to Jack Freeman for supporting me on Patreon. If you would also like to help support this channel, you can do so using the link below. Doing so will give you access to certain videos early, as well as allow you to participate in certain polls for upcoming content. If you can't or simply don't want to support that way, that's also perfectly fine. Liking this video or subscribing if you haven't already also helps support this channel in the long run. With that, as always, I thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.